In this section, preparing for the artificial language test, we'll discuss what the artificial language is and why it's an important part of the U.S. Border Patrol test.
The artificial language test is a test you would take if you don't know standard Spanish or feel you don't know it well enough to pass the Spanish proficiency test. The artificial language test is a unique test that measures your ability to learn Spanish. It predicts an applicant's success in learning Spanish at the Border Patrol Academy.
Basically, the artificial language is a made-up language with grammatical rules similar to Spanish. The artificial language test shows whether you can apply basic rules of grammar to words and sentences. Don't feel overwhelmed by the grammatical rules and vocabulary words in the artificial language. We'll go through everything here so you know what to expect. Let's go through Section 4 of the manual. Section 4 is organized into 5 parts: vocabulary, grammar, glossary, practice test, and rationale for each response. When you take the actual test, you will be given the vocabulary, grammatical rules, and glossary to have in front of you during the entire test. Let's get into a little more detail on each of those. Follow along with me in the manual. First, vocabulary. The vocabulary list you'll be given is set up like an English-Spanish dictionary. As you see here, on the left side you would look up an English word to learn its equivalent in the artificial language. On the right side, you would look up a word in the artificial language list to see what it means in English. Don't memorize the vocabulary list in the preparation manual. You'll get a different set of words at the actual test, and you'll be able to use the list during the entire test. We're just trying to teach you how to use the list when you take the real test. Let's try it. Let's look up the artificial language equivalent for alien. First, look at the vocabulary list on the left. The words are listed alphabetically in English. Find the word alien. Look across from alien under the vocabulary list headed artificial language. You'll see that hustlik is the word for alien. Later, you'll get more practice using the vocabulary list when we go through some examples. Let's look at the grammatical rules for the artificial language section. The grammatical rules here are almost the same as those used in the actual test. There might be slight variations in the test you take. We don't want you to memorize these sample rules of grammar. You'll be given similar but new rules at the actual test. We just want you to understand how to apply the rules so you can do it quickly and comfortably at the real test. Let's go through 2 of the grammatical rules together. Look at Rule 1 in your manual. This is the rule for making the feminine form of a singular noun, pronoun, adjective, or article. In English, the gender of words is usually not important, but it is in Spanish and in the artificial language test. By the way, if you need a reminder on what a noun, pronoun, adjective, or article is, consult the glossary of grammatical terms. To form a feminine singular noun, the rules tell us to add nef to the end of the masculine singular word. For example, if a male eagle is a verlik, then a female eagle is a verlik nef. See how nef was added to the noun verlik? Let's look at one more example using an adjective. If an ambitious man is a tosla man, then an ambitious woman is a tosla nef woman. Here the adjective tosla is made feminine by adding nef to tosla, making tosla nef. Notice that in English, the adjective ambitious does not have a particular gender. By contrast, in Spanish and in the artificial language, adjectives and articles match the gender of the nouns or pronouns they modify. Look at Rule 2. This is the rule for making nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and articles plural. According to Rule 2, to make a plural, you add the suffix "-as" to the noun, pronoun, adjective, or article. For example, if one male eagle is a verlik, several male eagles are verlik "-as". Verlik is masculine singular. Adding "-as" to verlik makes it masculine plural. It's like adding s or es in English to make a noun plural. In the artificial language, you just add "-as". This next example is not in the preparation manual, but let's go over it for extra practice. The feminine singular form of eagle is verlik nef. Remember how we added the suffix -nef to make the feminine form? To make the noun plural, we add -os. The feminine plural form of the noun is then verlich nef -os. Did you follow that? Let's look at another example to make sure you've got it. Remember our adjective toslanef? If an ambitious woman is a toslanef woman, several ambitious women are toslanef-os women. Tosla is the base adjective. Nef made it feminine, and os made it plural. Before you take the artificial language practice test in the manual, be sure to review all the grammatical rules. You can't bring anything with you into the real test, but during the test, you can make yourself a reference sheet before you start answering the questions. For instance, your reference sheet might say, feminine, add suffix nef. Plural, add suffix oz. It may be a good idea to make a reference sheet before you take the practice test to see if a reference sheet would aid you during the actual test. After the grammatical rules in the manual, you'll see the glossary of grammatical terms. At the real test, you will be given grammatical rules for the artificial language. It's helpful for you to understand the grammatical terms before you take the test. That way, you can just concentrate on the vocabulary and rules of the artificial language. Now, let's discuss the practice test. The practice test in your manual is similar to the actual test. In fact, the practice test was taken from an older version of the actual test. The practice test asks you to translate sentences or phrases from English to the artificial language using grammatical rules that you'll be given. At the actual test, you'll be given an answer sheet and 2 booklets. One is the supplemental booklet that contains vocabulary lists, grammatical rules, and a glossary of grammatical terms. The other booklet contains the test questions. So you'll have 3 things in front of you: the test questions, the answer sheet, and the supplemental booklet with the rules and vocabulary. You'll flip back and forth in the supplemental booklet to answer the test questions.
Let's review what we've talked about. First, you don't have to memorize the artificial language vocabulary or grammar rules. The vocabulary and the grammatical rules will be provided at the test in the supplemental booklet we mentioned. Second, when the test begins, you can create a reference guide from the grammar rules to use during the test. That will be up to you. Now, let's get ready to take the practice test. Make sure you have thoroughly reviewed the grammatical rules before starting the practice test. Stop the DVD and come back to it after your review. There are 50 questions on the artificial language practice test. Each type of question you see in the practice test will be on the real test. We'll go through each section of the test, plus a few examples, so you can see how to use the vocabulary list and the grammar rules we talked about. Following the practice test are the correct answers and explanations for all 50 questions. Don't cheat yourself and flip to the answers before you take the practice test. Give yourself a chance to think through the grammar rules and use the vocabulary. Answer the questions yourself first, then check them against these answers. Actually, you could go through these practice questions a couple of times and still benefit from them. Write your answers on a separate piece of paper, not in the book. That way you can go back later and try the test again.